I'm Emily Jang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Cisco increases its footprint in the cloud and pushes further into software. We'll put its $1.9 billion deal to buy BroadSoft in focus. Plus, less than 10 days before Big Tech's Big Three election testimony on Capitol Hill, one California House representative put Silicon Valley on notice. Congressman Ro Khanna joins us this hour. And the tech earnings parade continues this week in full. We preview what to expect from Amazon, Alphabet, and Twitter. But first, to our lead. Cisco's M&A spree continues. The tech giant snapping up software maker BroadSoft in a deal valued at $1.9 billion. The move helps expand Cisco's presence in software and the cloud, which has been a huge priority for the company. And it caps off a busy year of deal making. The purchase of BroadSoft marks the 9th acquisition for Cisco this year. For more reaction, we are joined now by Ed Hammond from the Bloomberg News Deals team and our editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, here with me in the studio. So, Corey, I'll start with you. Why is Cisco buying BroadSoft?
Well, BroadSoft was out there and it looked like it was going to be acquired by somebody. So Cisco, their famous M&A team, of course, takes a look at every possible deal out there. It matches a lot of the product areas where Cisco already exists. That is software, in particular, software that's used for networks, but also used for communications platforms. They have a lot of the offerings. They've been competing against BroadSoft for some time. They also call on a lot of the same customers. So in some ways, it's a natural fit. In the other ways, you wonder how additive it'll be in a product category, in a product-by-product category, even.
Right, especially as they've made 9 acquisitions so far this year. Ed, talk to us about the terms of the deal here and what stands out.
So it's a reasonably large premium, Emily. It's I think if you look at it from its uninterrupted price back in August before rumors first surfaced, it's about 28% premium, which is a fairly healthy one for this sector right now. It's not a huge deal, obviously, by Cisco standards, but for them, as you mentioned, I think they've done 9 this year. This is actually their 200th takeover in their history, which is really a phenomenal number. But it is a public company. Usually we see Cisco do small private market deals. This is slightly unusual in as much as it's public. From what we understand, and according to sources familiar with the matter, it was a reasonably competitive process. There were other people who were obviously interested in this asset. And I think that's in some ways reflected in, as I say, a fairly decent premium that Cisco ended up paying.
I actually interviewed Chuck Robbins, CEO of Cisco, just last week and asked him about M&A, how open they are to bigger deals, more revenue-driving deals. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We're open to any acquisition that aligns strategically with where we need to go, whether they're small, large, mid-size, and I've said that repeatedly. It's when we think about innovation, we spend a lot of money on internal R&D, and we really wanted to refocus some of that into our core, which we've done. The M&A engine, I think we've bought somewhere between 15 and 20 companies since I became CEO.
And he's been CEO now going on 3 years. Corey, are we going to see more of this? That's what it sounds like.
We'll certainly see lots of M&A. I mean, that's been Cisco's bread and butter for a very long time. They try to innovate internally. They try to acquire other companies and use those people and keep those people. And I think that, from a shareholder's perspective, one starts to get concerned as shareholder count, as revenues go up, maybe not. The stock price kind of stays flat, but the number of shares outstanding goes up because they're issuing so many shares, whether it's through options to employees or options given out in deals. So even as this is a cash deal, more and more employees who are getting a lot of these options are seeing their options convert. It's a concern when the share count's not going down or they're using cash to buy back shares, which is sort of a longer-term concern from Cisco. From a product standpoint, this is all about unified messaging, and it's a buzzword that we hear a lot about. But the notion that you can contact an employee on their cell phone, in their corporate email, with a voicemail that follows them, where they're not having to check multiple devices all the time to see what's going on, this is a unified messaging product. My question about this ultimately is going to be how much additive revenue gain can they get? So traditionally, when Cisco buys a product they compete with, they say, hey, you've got a good product, we had a good product, but we're going to take our vaunted Cisco sales force and sell this thing everywhere. Well, BroadSoft is already there. They're already selling to AT&T. They're already selling to Rogers Communications. They're already selling to, Verizon's a 10% customer. So the question is, where can they really add and use the leverage that the Cisco sales force has traditionally provided to a product that in this case is already pretty, pun intended, broadly out there?
Right. And on that note, Ed, I mean, are we going to see any changes immediately at Cisco in particular as a result of this, or simply more of Cisco selling what BroadSoft has to offer?
I don't think we're going to see any immediate changes. Look, Cisco have probably one of the world's greatest sales organizations, sales teams. They're going to plug this into that, obviously. It's not a huge deal for them. It's not going to move the needle in terms of what Cisco do. I think another crucial buzz term here, if you like, is recurring revenue. This will allow Cisco to do more of these sort of servicing contracts rather than just selling hardware. And that's something we're seeing the whole industry migrate towards. We're seeing it across sectors. Actually, we're seeing industrial companies do similar stuff because it creates much more stability in what's otherwise a fairly volatile and unpredictable environment, particularly in tech.
Corey, when I spoke to Chuck last week, we talked about how well the company is making this transition from, a networking provider to software and services. How well are they actually, weathering this big change in their business?
Well, I think that, a great amount of curve, because they've had so much greater success than all their other big competitors from 10 or even 15 years ago. Almost all of them have fallen by the wayside. I mean, if you look at what has happened in the hardware sales business, look at the companies like Hewlett-Packard, Dell, the Sun business is now part of Oracle, IBM. All those businesses have face planted. Now they all talked about making a change to software, and all of them have failed. I mean, with the exception of some, which of course, got gobbled up by a software company. But Mark Andreessen, right? Software is eating the world. Well, that already happened at Sun. But I think that what's happening at Cisco, you see bumpier results, and you saw in their prior life as a purely a hardware slinger. They've always had security and software as part of what they do, but it's a much more important piece of their business. And to Ed's point, it could be a more recurring and predictable part of their business, but it hasn't been big enough to be that yet. All
right, Corey Johnson, our editor-at-large, Ed Hammond on the Deals team. Thank you both so much. We will keep watching. Now, a stock we're watching, shares of Etsy falling as much as 6% in the trading session, its biggest move since May 17th. Pressure is on the stock after Amazon announced the launch of its own handmade gift shop site, going into direct competition with Etsy heading into the holiday season. Coming up, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives has some strong words for Silicon Valley. What he had to say next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. New York, 2 p.m. San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. A new function is coming to Facebook Messenger. TD Ameritrade clients are now able to trade equities and exchange traded funds on the social media chat client. They can also make deposits, access quarterly performance video statements, and receive weekly alerts that rehash market moves. The firm is the first to offer trading services on that platform. Well, on November 1st, 3 of the top tech firms will testify before Congress. Lawmakers want them to answer publicly about Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. elections. But one congressman isn't waiting until then to challenge Silicon Valley. Representative Ro Khanna of California has penned a stirring op-ed in the Washington Post titled, "Trump Beats Silicon Valley at Its Own Game. Now it must prove itself." In it, he takes big tech to tasks over a variety of issues, from election meddling to diversity and more. He joins me now from Washington. Representative Khanna, thank you so much for joining us. So you say Trump used the tools of technology to win, despite Silicon Valley's overwhelming support for Hillary Clinton. It is almost as if Trump bested tech leaders at the game they invented. How so?
Well, Trump was very effective in using Twitter and Facebook to get passionate support to get his message out. But a lot of these platforms, of course, were abused. They amplified fake voices, extreme voices that pretended to be 10,000 people, even though there was only one person. They trafficked in false news. And so tech needs to help figure out how to solve some of these issues. We know it can empower individuals in extraordinary ways, but we need to fix the excess that we saw in the 2016 election cycle.
Right. You say tech tools should strengthen, not weaken democracy. And Russian interference aside, some would argue that, social media has dramatically increased the number of voices that are being heard. Can tech companies really be responsible for all of this?
Well, I actually think tech has played a very positive role overall. I mean, it gave the rise to Barack Obama, to Bernie Sanders. I often joke at town halls that the average person can have more of a voice by having a clever tweet or Facebook post than I can by speaking to an empty chamber in Congress. So tech has empowered individuals in extraordinary ways. But that said, there are things that, now that they have become a platform where almost 50% of Americans get their news there, that they need to do. One is having some basic differentiation between fact and opinion. Newspapers, TV stations like yours have third-party verification, and they independently check facts. There can be third-party verification on some of the posts. They should look at providing perhaps an alternative perspective if viewers want that alternative perspective. They just need to look at what their journalistic responsibilities can be without suppressing the freedom of expression. And I'm encouraged that a number of tech companies are doing that, and that dialogue has begun.
You wonder, though, how far these companies can go, how well companies can distinguish between fact and opinion when our own president may have a different opinion of the facts than the facts.
I agree. It's a very difficult issue, but there are independent third-party sites which can at least rate content. So if someone is out there saying the sky is green or that, Barack Obama isn't an American citizen, they could at least have a rating and verification, just like newspapers do, just like television stations do. Or they could provide a link to say, here are some alternative perspectives if you so choose. I think these tech companies, look, the tech company and social media is very different than television. Television isn't as interactive. People aren't responding to me. It's a broadcast to individuals, and tech is a person-to-person communication. So tech can't be responsible for every single post and the content of every single post. That said, they do need to move towards adopting some journalistic standards of third-party verification, fact verification, so that they give users an informed perspective.
That said, I wonder, how much can we rely on companies to do the right thing, or whatever is in the best interest of society, rather than what's in the best interest of their business? And how much should the government actually be in charge of figuring out whether there's Russian interference on these platforms? Should there be government regulation?
Well, I think there are two different questions. In terms of the best interest for society, I think that was Silicon Valley's tradition with David Packard and Hewlett-Packard, some of the early founders, Andy Grove. They talked about building technology in a way that would help society, help empower people. And if you talk to tech leaders, that's what they really hope, that their platforms would help improve communication, lead to a more connected world, create more jobs. Tim Cook recently said that business leaders have a moral responsibility to care about education and jobs. Sundar Pichai recently announced a $1 billion initiative to prepare folks for the tech jobs of the future. So I think there is an ongoing awareness with tech leaders that they have to care about their contribution to jobs in places that don't have them and to the democratic conversation, given that they are some of the largest companies in the nation and some of them and have such great responsibility and so many viewers. On the Russia issue, I think we definitely need better intelligence sharing between tech companies and the government so that they can get advance notice if there is suspicious activity and act on it. And tech companies need to help adopt exceptional processing to look at false accounts or bad accounts, bad actors, the way some banks have. Some of it is hiring more people, but even if they hire thousands of more people, given the volume, they probably need investments in machine learning and artificial intelligence to be able to do some of that work. So I'm hopeful a lot of it will be tech coming to its own conclusion, but there will probably be a role for Congress and lawmakers as well to have constructive rules that tech can follow.
Similarly, you talk about the importance of increasing diversity at these companies, upward mobility. Is this something that you think companies can do on their own? We know that the representation of women and minorities at tech companies is very low. Or is this something that the government should regulate?
Well, I think it's in the tech company's own advantage to expand their imagination in recruiting. Let me give you a concrete example. 45% of African Americans who have STEM degrees go to a historically black college or university. 45%. Now, if tech companies want to expand where there's talent, they should form partnerships with some of the best historically black colleges and universities in the country and recruit from there. The NFL in the 1960s, the Oakland Raiders did that. They started recruiting at the HBCUs, and it gave them a whole competitive advantage over the rest of the teams in the NFL. At a time where we have such scarcity for engineers and tech talent, and everyone's concerned that Google and Facebook and Apple is getting all the talent, expanding the pool and going to places like HBCUs would make a difference. Same with
right.
Go ahead.
The question isn't whether or not they should. It's whether the government should force them to do so or legislate, various requirements for representation of women and minorities in your ranks.
Well, I'm not for quotas or government regulating that, but I do think government can make investments in women's schools that focus on STEM, in HBCUs, in providing greater opportunities and pathways and giving incentives for corporate mentorship for women leaders. I think government can incentivize the creation of the pipeline and in getting people into those leadership ranks, but I don't think they should regulate a number that tech companies have to fill as a quota. I think that would be going too far.
All right, Representative Ro Khanna, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here on the show. On Tuesday, we will bring you the latest on the congressional probe into the Trump campaign and Russia with an interview with Representative Eric Swalwell. That's at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The competition for Amazon's second headquarters continues to heat up. The Seattle-based tech giant says it received 238 proposals from cities and regions across the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. The online retailer announced its search for a second home base last month, promising to bring 50,000 new jobs and spend more than $5 billion on construction. Only 7 states refrained from entering the bidding process. Coming up, competition among meal kit services is still going strong despite Blue Apron's post-IPO struggles. We'll discuss HelloFresh's public market plans next. This is Bloomberg. Uber is expanding its operations in Europe. The ride-hailing giant will open a new service center in Lisbon to provide assistance to drivers and passengers in France, Spain, and Portugal. The company expects to create 250 new jobs from this venture. Meantime, in London, Uber is still seeking an appeal of its license ban. Well, meal kit startup HelloFresh is gearing up for its IPO this week, targeting a $1.8 billion valuation. The company plans to be the #1 player in this space in the U.S. by overtaking Blue Apron, which has seen its own challenges since going public earlier this year. For more, let's go to Nabila Ahmed, who is covering the story for Bloomberg News. Nabila, first of all, how does HelloFresh avoid the fate of Blue Apron?
Well, that's the big question, Emily. And the thing is that they really have to distance themselves from the Blue Apron narrative. Blue Apron, as you know, since they listed in June, their shares have fallen about 50%. And they've seen customers declining. They've had to do a restructure. They've had to cut 6% of their workforce. So things aren't going very well for them at all. Luckily for HelloFresh, they're doing pretty well. In the third quarter, their sales were about 143 million euros in the US, which was up from 120 million the previous quarter. And they're trying to sort of really go for Blue Apron and target them. And the CEO, Dominic Richter, has come out and said that they'll probably overtake Blue Apron in the US sort of by about the third or fourth quarter of next year.
What about the business model sets HelloFresh apart from Blue Apron, where, let's say, they may not fall victim to the same things that has caused Blue Apron to stumble?
I think what they're relying on really is their customer base. At the moment, they've got 1.3 million active customers, and that's really their strength. They're in 10 markets. They're obviously powering ahead in the US. But as you say, I mean, look, like Blue Apron as well, they're not profitable yet. So they're really relying on those sales to get up there.
And how much of a threat is the Amazon factor?
Emily, as you know, the Amazon factor is a threat to everything from retail and grocery to pharmacy, any industry you can think of, really. And for HelloFresh, it's the same. And Blue Apron really is down a lot because of Amazon's deal with Whole Foods. I mean, that really affected investor sentiment towards that stock. And how people adapt to Amazon in this new world is really going to be the question.
What are we looking ahead to when it comes to the IPO market this year? We've seen many, lukewarm, failures, if you will, and we've seen a few scattered success stories.
Yeah, I mean, Snap and Blue Apron are two well-noted failures, I guess. We've seen a few good ones. In Europe, the investors have been really receptive to IPOs. Already this quarter, there have been 17 of them. And the European market is running a little bit ahead of the US market. But this quarter, they are expected to pick up. But really, investors are looking for growth stories. And as we know, there isn't a lot of growth to be found in stock markets globally. So if HelloFresh can prove that it can actually generate some earnings as well as its sales, I'm sure it will do well.
All right, Nabila Ahmed, thanks so much. Our Bloomberg News reporter there will be following that when that comes out of the gate. Now, coming up, a few tech giants report earnings this week. We'll look ahead to what we should expect out of Amazon, Alphabet, and Twitter next. And a new feature I'd want to bring to your attention, our interactive TV function. You can find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You can watch us live. If you miss an interview, you can go back to it. You can send our producers a message, play along with the charts we bring you on air. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only. Check it out at TV Go. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Joseph Dunford says the public and the relatives of 4 American soldiers killed in Niger deserve answers about this month's deadly ambush.
We owe the families as much information as we can find out about what happened. And we owe the American people an explanation of what their men and women were doing at this particular time. When I say that, I mean men and women in harm's way anywhere in the world. They should know what the mission is and what we're trying to accomplish when we're there.
General Dunford says the 4 men died October 4th in what he called a difficult firefight. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker says talks on a future relationship with the United Kingdom are on hold until the rights of citizens are assured and a financial settlement is reached. Juncker told a forum in Strasbourg he discussed the matter with British Prime Minister Theresa May at a dinner last week. Catalonia's parliament is scheduled to debate for Thursday when separatists will discuss Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy's plans to remove the government and take direct control of the region from Madrid. The group reportedly plans to block the government's efforts with a human shield. 19 state attorneys general want a federal judge to force the Trump administration to pay health care subsidies the president cut off this month. The attorneys general argue the monthly payments are required under law and stopping them will harm consumers. The White House says the government cannot legally continue paying the subsidies because there's no formal congressional authorization. General News, Global News, 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in New York, 8:30 Tuesday morning in Sydney. My colleague Paul Allen has a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Well, U.S. markets closed a little weaker, and we're seeing that knock on into early trade in New Zealand. The NZX off about 1/5%, half an hour into Tuesday morning trade. Here in Australia, ASX futures are looking pretty flat, off just by 5 points. We've seen the iron ore price weaken a little overnight to $62 per tonne. The Aussie dollar weakening to be just above 78 US cents as well. In Japan, Nikkei futures looking mixed at the moment. This is after the Nikkei share average, though, hit 21-year highs after the election result in Japan. And keep an eye on Toshiba today. There's an EGM. Proxy advisors are recommending voting against the annual earnings, citing the company's corporate governance, but it looks like the company is going to win that vote regardless. That's just some of what we're watching today. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Earnings season continues to unfold with some of the biggest tech companies reporting later this week. Twitter and Alphabet will both report on Thursday. That is just days before both companies are expected in court on November 1st. Also reporting Thursday, Amazon, which is currently in the midst of picking a new city to build its second headquarters. Joining us now, a man who covers all three companies, Mark Mahaney, analyst at RBC Capital. Busy week for you, Mark.
Yes.
Let's start with Google.
Okay.
What are the top line numbers you're watching?
I think is whether this company for the 31st consecutive quarter can sustain 20% top line growth. That's the one really most important number. On the cost side is something called TAC, or traffic acquisition costs. They're now spending about $5 billion a quarter in revenue share with partners like Google, like Samsung. And the growth of that has been almost 50% in the last quarter or two. So it's the big boogie issue, I think, if you will, for the boo issue, since it's almost Halloween, for investors. Is this thing has been accelerating the growth. So the question is, can the company manage those traffic acquisition costs? Those are the two numbers to watch for.
The 20%. Do you think they can keep it up?
Yes, I think so. Look, we've done advertiser survey. We've done this for about 5 years. Every 6 months, it's the broadest survey that's done out there. And we see growing and increasing adoption of Google. I know that sounds odd to be saying this even at this stage, but we're still seeing it. Rising adoption, rising advertiser interest in advertising on two platforms in particular, Facebook, but still Google. So I don't think there's any change from that 20% year-over-year growth.
And what about when it comes to YouTube? We know they don't break a lot of stats out, but we are always looking for more.
Yeah, I wish we had stats on it. I'm guessing that they're actually doing better with YouTube than most people think. I think market consensus is they're doing about $10 billion, $12 billion a year in revenue. I think that number could be closer to $15 to $20 billion, but it's hard to come up with proof. I think we're clearly seeing a migration of TV ad budgets online, and I think YouTube is there scooping it up faster than people realize.
Interesting. So Google, Facebook, and Twitter appearing on November 1st to testify before Congress. Does this issue of fake news, this issue of foreign actors interfering on these platforms, does that impact the business of these companies down the line? Will
No, I don't
it hurt
think
the numbers?
so. I don't think so. I'll give you a different take on it. So you're telling me that somebody could spend a couple $100,000 and swing a U.S. election? Boy, that tells you that advertisers should be flocking more of their budgets to those platforms, because what else could they impact? What other doohickeys could they sell? So I'm struck by just how powerful these platforms are. Of course, with that comes responsibility, and whether or not these companies are really living up to that responsibility, that's a different issue. But from advertiser perspective, we've seen no break in increasing advertiser interest. But really in those two platforms, Twitter's in a separate category. That's still in an experimental budget zone for most advertisers. I don't think these issues impact advertiser or consumer demand for the platform.
So let's talk about Twitter. Continued concerns about user and revenue growth. Can they turn the tide?
Well, the problem is there's a lack of the latter. Their revenue, this advertising revenue this quarter is expected to come at around $500 million. That's down 11% year over year. Last quarter, it was down 8%. So it's getting worse. It's hard to buy a stock where in the secular growth industry where advertising revenue is declining. And then you talked about users. You mentioned users. Users, one of the spook issues last quarter was that MAUs, those monthly average users, declined sequentially in the U.S. I mean, why is that happening given all the publicity around Twitter? It probably says they've got a product problem, they've got a usage problem, or they peaked out. And those are very hard things to fix. I don't think there's a near-term fix.
They say they're taking a new approach to harassment, which has been increasingly in the spotlight with all of these sexual harassment allegations, the Me Too campaign. Do you think it's too little too late, or can they really change the nature of the platform and how people use it?
At Twitter? I think it's probably one of the most important things they need to change. There's a lot of fascinating, interesting, useful commentary on Twitter so much of the time, just as an average Twitter user. It's hard to see somebody write something thoughtful and not in one of those comments see something inappropriate written in response. And they know that there's a safety issue. I know it's a tough line. You don't want to cut off people's willingness to or ability to speak their minds. But I don't know how you do it technically, but it's just if there's a way to make this, remove it, all that cesspool of content that's in there, remove that. There's some very interesting content. I don't know how that's going to be fixed.
How much is that hurting the business?
I'm sure it's hurting it dramatically. I think that's why MAUs are declining. I think people know that when you go there, and if you wanted to say something, who knows what somebody's going to shoot at you. I think it depresses usage. No question about it.
All right, let's move on to Amazon. We're going to see a bit more information about the acquisition of Whole Foods, how much that's going. Well, we hope.
Yeah, we hope.
What do you think we'll see?
I think we're going to get very limited disclosure, like maybe just the revenue contribution. We only had Whole Foods in for a month. We have very little data so far. We do think that we saw same-store sales growth re-accelerated Whole Foods, but that's just 1 month, so who knows? I'd like to hear the Amazon playbook. We never really heard it, what it's going to be with Whole Foods. And then it's going to be the rest of the business. Can AWS, the cloud business, sustain 40% growth? And can those margins expand like kind of into the mid-20s? It's the most profitable, fastest growing part of the business. If there were one thing to crack, there's one thing that would really crack Amazon stock, it probably wouldn't be some misexecution at Whole Foods. It would be at AWS. So is there greater competition, risk, and is it damaging the growth rates or the margins? If there isn't, the stock's fine. If there is, stock could be under pressure.
As we head into holiday season, anything in particular you'd be watching with Amazon?
They are accelerating their investment spend in distribution centers in faster and faster delivery. And you're seeing eBay trying to catch up by offering 3-day delivery when Amazon's at 1 day and faster.
Right.
So this should, the faster delivery should lead to greater customer satisfaction, and we should see that ordering deadline going into the Christmas holidays shorter and shorter. I would expect them to have stronger Christmases every year because of that, simply because of the shortened delivery time.
All right, Mark Mahaney, RBC Capital Markets. Always great to have you here on the show. We'll be watching for your reports this week.
Thanks.
Thank you. Quick disclosure, Bloomberg LP is developing a global breaking news network for Twitter. All right, well, Android creator Andy Rubin is feeling the heat of a crowded smartphone market. His newest creation, the Essential phone, is getting a price cut of $200. The price is now $499. It originally cost $699. This coming after reports of disappointing sales for the new smartphone. The launch of other new devices from the likes of Apple and Google also could have hurt the company. Customers who already bought a device are being offered a $200 credit. Coming up, there's a new player in Silicon Valley, and it is bringing a new approach to match corporations with startups. Next, this is Bloomberg. There's a new matchmaking service in Silicon Valley, but it is not a swipe right dating app. Sherpa Foundry and Silicon Valley Bank announced a new targeted advisory service called Silicon Foundry. The new entity aims to connect startups with big companies looking for insights into the latest technology that might affect their industry. The company says it aims to avoid a common bias made in venture capital networking, where firms typically make connections to support their own investments. Joining me now is the CEO of Silicon Foundry, Neil Hansch. Neil, thank you so much for joining us. So you call yourselves your own little Switzerland. How exactly will this work?
Yes, and we were started in 2013, and so we've been at this for a few years, but this is really our announcement today with the deep invested partnership with Silicon Valley Bank. And the way that we're independent is, and we have been independent from day one, is we work with corporations the world over, helping them navigate the startup ecosystem. They are our members, which is part of our business model, and so we are also, though, we view ourselves as a resource for the entire ecosystem.
You call them members, not clients.
That's right.
Why would these companies pay for something they're used to getting for free?
Yes. So the getting for free, and what you're referring to is many venture firms, particularly over the last decade, have built out corporate outreach arms, executive briefing centers, business development functions who work for the fund and whose interests are in promoting the interests of the fund's portfolio companies. We're an independent company. Our model and our revenues come from our members. So we're not an outreach arm of any one fund. In fact, we work with all of the funds in the introductions we make, in the private events that we have VCs from all over the valley and the world represented in those.
And of course, Sherpa does have venture capital funds as well, early stage and late stage. Is there a Chinese wall between?
There is. We're not a portfolio company of Sherpa Capital. The shared history there are the co-founders, and Shervin Pishavar and Scott Stanford. But we operate as an independent company, and we are, again, working with our members. And so our members want to find the best companies, the best emerging technologies. They want to be aware of the new business models that are emerging, regardless of who's backed them, regardless of where they are based in the world.
So let's talk about some examples. A company like Salesforce, which has fairly strong connections in Silicon Valley. Why would they want access to something like the Silicon Foundry?
Yes, and for Salesforce, and each member is a bit different,
right?
Where they are in their life cycle, where we can provide the most value. With Salesforce, we tend to work with their ventures portfolio companies, helping them network within the portfolio. Also, we spend all day long meeting with corporations from around the world, so we can provide connections between corporations in Europe, in the States, in Asia, to their portfolio companies.
Is the demand for acquisitions, startup acquisitions, is that impacting the interest here?
I think so. I mean, I think so. As we think about it, when we work with these corporations, generally it's for one of multiple outcomes, if not all of them they're looking for. They're looking to identify startups where they can be a customer or perhaps a partner or a strategic investor. As we know, a third of all deals now, venture deals, also have a corporate participating, and of course M&A activity. So that's, they're all a spectrum, and sometimes they start as a customer relationship and then ultimately blossoms to an M&A.
So on that note, where does your responsibility to a member stop? I mean, would you help an acquisition go through from beginning to end, or would you say hands off?
We do. I mean, so it really depends on the member, the depth through which we stay post-introduction. And again, it all starts with identification. We have members where we've been a part of the diligence process on an M&A deal. Certainly, if they have corporate venture arms, we tend to work with them because they're in the business of deal sourcing and qualifying. What we don't do is we don't compete with banks. We're not incentivized. I think that's an important part of our model. Given it's a membership-based model, a flat annual fee, our incentives are entirely aligned with our members. And we're unbiased, and so we're not pushing them to do a deal, but we're supporters, and we help them through the deal processes.
So you're just now announcing this partnership, but you've been at this for a couple of years now. What are some of the biggest success stories?
Yes. So a lot of the work we do is confidential and private. Up until today, our website was a single splash page, even though we've been at it for a few years. The types of things that we've done with our members, it is strategic investments. We had one member, which is a European postal service. They made a $750 million acquisition 2 weeks ago, and we have a hand in part of that diligence process. A lot of what we do is more qualitative. Right, as we're helping our members, providing insights and intelligence and ideating and making recommendations, those don't make their way into press releases, but that has a big impact in terms of their own product roadmap and how they're engaging the ecosystem.
There have been some dramatic changes in the funding environment. SoftBank, of course, with their $100 billion vision fund. Max Levchin, co-founder of PayPal, told me last week it's like the asteroid in the room. How much do these changing macroeconomic conditions impact the weather in Switzerland, let's say?
Yes. Well, I think one of the things we've seen is certainly demand, or where our message has resonated most obviously is with international players. And if you talk SoftBank, if you're talking Asia, you've got Alibaba, you've got so many of these international players now coming here, being more and more active directly. And so I think that maybe where we see it play out in Switzerland land is many of the companies that we're working with. We have members from the Middle East, from Japan, and so it's truly a global series of corporates who are increasingly committing attention, time, resources, dollars, boots on the ground here in the Valley to get involved.
All right, Neil Hansch, Silicon Foundry CEO and Managing Partner, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here on the show. All right, coming up, the automation wave is cresting. How it will impact jobs from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. That is next. And a quick programming note, Bloomberg's Alex Steele will be in Washington at the annual SIFMA meeting, SIFMA meeting. Tune in for a great lineup of guests, including David Solomon, Goldman Sachs president and co-COO. Catch that conversation at 9 a.m. Eastern. This is Bloomberg. The rise of automation and artificial intelligence is causing anxiety about upheaval in the workforce. The fear is the technology will leave millions of Americans unemployed in the next decade. Robert LoCascio, the founder and CEO of LivePerson, which is a messaging and bot platform that develops products for online messaging and analytics, spoke with Bloomberg's Scarlett Fu, Julia Chatterley, and Joe Weisenthal.
Actually, it's quite good if it's implemented correctly. So we work with like Vodafone in the UK, and about 70% of the time we're getting a positive hit rate to answer a question. Unfortunately, because it's like the Wild West, there's people are throwing up bots on Facebook and different messaging platforms, and so sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But we're working with large brands like T-Mobile, Vodafone, Citibank, and these guys, we do it at a different scale.
Okay, so how many of those that initially answered by a non-real life person then go on to actually need, despite the interaction there, to a live person? And how do you think that's going to change as people implement properly? Because then we're talking jobs.
So if we look at today, still the majority have to be answered through human interactions. But what I can see over time, and we do 50 million chats and messages a month on our platform, so we see these conversations.
Yeah.
But over time, I believe about 80% of the conversation will be automated and 20% will be a human being. And we have a thing called Tango, where today a human and a bot work together. And they actually work side by side. And that seems to be like an optimal way to implement today.
So you're saying there's 3 million people in the US alone in call centers, and you're saying actually that 80% of those at some point in the future won't be there anymore.
Actually, I think it's a little different. I wrote an article about this, which is I think they're going to transform their businesses, what they do in the business. Today, they're answering a lot of questions over and over again, which is not high valued. But where they'll end up going is more on the high valued customer connection and engagement. And so they're just kind of stuck, and they're not happy. Even the agents are not happy.
Right.
You know, you call up call centers and you experience what an agent feels. But there's a better way to use them in a business today.
Does it matter what customers want, though? I mean, I'm thrilled when I call my bank and I can speak with a human being as opposed to going through a bunch of numbers and pressing 0 repeatedly and saying representative 5 million times until someone comes to me.
Well, what we know now is that by implementing messaging, so we do messaging, is that actually consumers want to message. 80% of the time, you're using your mobile device to message on WhatsApp, Facebook, your friends and family. Now, when we implement that on businesses, that's where consumer behavior is. Nobody wants to call. We're forced to call. We want the answers to the questions, but voice is this kind of old technology where you press 1, press 2. Yeah. More importantly, we're put on hold all the time, and we lose our valuable time. But with messaging, and that's the pivot that's happening right now, the massive pivot, that's going to change our lives.
Why do you think there's so much anxiety about all this? Because unemployment rate is at 4.2%. For all the talk about robots replacing the jobs of humans, there's very little evidence that it's happening in large scale yet, at least in the U.S. Productivity, which you would expect to see surging if there were really a big AI-led revolution in the workforce, it's pretty muted. Why do you think the anxiety is so intense right now?
Well, usually this studio 10 years ago would have been a bunch of people on the other side of these cameras to you, and something's automated here. I'm just giving you, I'm looking around. Right. There's still 2 guys.
Yeah, there's no one behind the cameras for the most part.
But the reality is there are jobs that become automated, and you guys are here talking. So I'm saying there's an anxiety of the uncertainty of it, is that, am I going to lose my job? There's a lot of, I think, hype about it, but the reality is someone who is behind the camera now has a job somewhere else. Like, you're right, unemployment rate is very low. So someone here is now doing something else that's high valued in the Bloomberg organization. So things will shift, and you can't stop it, but they're shifting right now. And in customer care, it's happening very quick.
We talk a lot about AI. Private sector talks about it a lot. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg had that battle over the importance of it and whether we need to regulate. You were really punchy about Steven Mnuchin. You said he's naive about the impact of AI in your op-ed.
Yeah. So first of all, when I hear the word AI, it's kind of like I equate, I don't know what we're talking about, and I put it under the category of AI. Okay. Because when I hear that, everyone just throws everything under artificial intelligence, and what I look at is like more like automation. Like what automated tasks can we get done in our life that we don't need a human on the other side of that? So that's where I think he's a little naive, because even in a company today, when I talk to HR, let's say, and I've got to find out about benefits, do I really need to talk to an HR person, or can I ask a conversational interface? So AI, I feel, is this catch-all for the fear and anxiety, but the reality is things will get automated through natural language processing and the things that we're seeing today, and that's what's happening in our enterprises.
Governments aren't yet keeping up.
Well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
Maybe we can automate government, but I think things like the IRS, I think things like asking the government questions, there are big parts of the government that you could automate today that we would want. By the way, more importantly, we as consumers, we decide what we want to do. And if we want automation and we want to preserve our time and get through these very basic tasks and have some help from an automated service, we'll take it. And we're going to drive the change. No one can stop us.
That was Robert LoCascio, CEO of LivePerson on Bloomberg's What'd You Miss? And finally, a story we are watching. Snap is said to have overestimated the demand for its spectacles, with hundreds of thousands of unsold units sitting in warehouses. This according to a report from The Information. This is another setback for the struggling social media company. Last week, Snap cut 18 jobs in its recruiting department and decided to slow down hiring for next year. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. A reminder, we are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.